so get this. We are diving deep into some biblical astronomy today. You know, we're talking ancient scripture and the cosmos, and not just like the Christmas star. No, you sent over some stuff from Wikipedia on biblical astronomy, and honestly, some of these articles about Saturn, really interesting.
Yeah, I think we're going to find some pretty wild connections here.
Oh, I'm already hooked. I mean,
Maybe.
One thing I noticed right off the bat, the Bible itself, not super heavy on the astronomical details, which is kind of strange when you think about it, a book about, like, the creation of the universe. You'd think we'd get a few more specifics on those stars.
Well, it's true. The Bible isn't exactly an astronomy textbook. It wasn't meant to be. And what's fascinating is that actually tells us something. It gives us a glimpse into how these ancient cultures, they viewed the heavens. I mean, for them, astronomy, religion, all totally intertwined.
Right.
The sky wasn't just something to look at. It was like this source of power, wonder, even fear. So when we read the Bible, we're also reading their worldview. We're seeing those glimpses of how they interpreted, the entire cosmos and their place in it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like, we're not just reading the words, we're reading between the lines, trying to understand their whole perspective. And speaking of clues, there are some pretty interesting names of celestial bodies that pop up. We've got, Saturn's in there, everyone's favorite ringed planet, but I'm guessing it meant something a little different back then.
Oh, absolutely. And that actually connects perfectly to those articles that you shared about Saturn and the Jewish people. This connection goes back centuries. We're talking early church fathers even.
Wait, so church fathers were making connections between planets and, like, specific groups of people? This is getting deep. I love it.
Right. It might sound strange to us now, but this was all part of astrological thinking. And it goes even deeper. The Babylonian Talmud actually refers to Saturn as Shabbatai. Now, think about that for a second. Shabbatai. Does that sound familiar?
Okay, hold on. Shabbat, like the Jewish Sabbath, Saturday. Are you telling me there's this direct link between Saturn, the Sabbath day, and the Jewish people? Whoa. That can't be a coincidence, right?
It's not exactly a coincidence. It's about how they interpreted, the movements of the planets, what they signed meaning to. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
They didn't have telescopes, right?
Yeah.
They were working with what they could observe and what felt significant to them.
Yeah, that's true. Totally different world. This whole Saturn-Saturday connection is blowing my mind. Okay, so how did this association, how did it actually play out for the Jewish people? Was it seen as, like, a positive thing?
That's a great question. And the answer is, well, it's complicated. Because you see, in a lot of, like, Greek and Arabic astrology, Saturn, not always seen in the best light, sometimes even considered kind of a malignant planet.
Malignant, like bad luck, malignant. Oh, no, that's not good.
No, not. You see, they associated Saturn with, like, limitations, boundaries, even time itself. And, the whole concept of time leading to decay, death, it all kind of fed into this fear of Saturn.
It's fascinating, right? How they projected these anxieties onto the cosmos, and unfortunately, that kind of negative view of Saturn, got projected onto the Jewish people sometimes too.
Wow. So not exactly a badge of honor there for Saturn. Poor planet, getting that kind of reputation. But it gets more interesting, right? Because I was reading in the Kant Center article, there's this scholar, Abraham Ibn Ezra. He actually tried to kind of push back against those negative associations. Ibn Ezra. Fascinating figure. He really dug deep into all these astrological connections, trying to understand them through this, like, scientific but also religious lens. And he made this really interesting argument. He's saying that Saturn's influence isn't inherently bad. He even suggests it could be beneficial, especially when it comes to, you guessed it, observing the Sabbath.
Whoa, okay, so he flipped the script. Instead of this planet of misfortune, now Saturn's like this cosmic helper encouraging religious devotion. It really makes you wonder, what else were people seeing in the stars back then?
Right. And it's the amazing thing about exploring these ancient beliefs. It just opens up this universe of interpretations. We're talking like looking up at the same night sky, but seeing totally different pictures in those constellations.
And speaking of constellations, this deep dive took a little bit of a turn when I got to that Larimer article you sent.
Okay,
because he's claiming that October 9th, 2024, that's going to be a big day, astronomically speaking.
Yeah, that one definitely caught my eye too. It's a really fascinating look at how, even today, right, people are still trying to connect these big celestial events with what's happening down here on Earth.
For sure. So for our listeners who haven't read the article yet, Larimer seems pretty convinced that, like, the position of the planets on that date, it's going to be super significant. He talks about Saturn and the day of YHVH. Can you maybe unpack that a little?
Yeah. So Lorimer, he's kind of connecting a lot of different threads in this article. He starts with Saturn, sixth planet, right? That aligns with the number 6. And then he links that to the number of the beast, 666 from the book of Revelation. And then he brings in these references to Saturn as Molech and Chin from the Old Testament, suggesting some kind of connection to ancient pagan worship.
Okay, so he's building a case for Saturn being this representation of something, like negative, maybe even apocalyptic, based on these biblical references. That's a pretty bold statement to just throw out there.
It is bold,
Yeah.
but, it's not completely out there when you think about how people have interpreted these celestial events throughout history. I mean, for centuries, comets, those were seen as harbingers of doom, eclipses, bad omens, even just the appearance of certain stars, right? People thought they could foretell major events.
True. Those celestial objects, they carried a lot of weight back then. But honestly, when I got to the part about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, I wasn't sure what to make of it. He claims they're going to be literally represented by constellations on October 9th.
Yeah, that's where his interpretation gets very literal. He actually identifies specific constellations, like Centaurus and Libra, with the black horse, and like the scales of judgment. He even sees Mars, the red planet, as representing the second horseman, as one of the Gemini twins, who were, as it happens, known as horsemen in Greek mythology.
Whoa, okay, so we've got this blend of biblical references, mythology, and like the actual positions of the planets on this very specific date. It's a lot. As someone who studies this stuff, what do you make of it all?
Well, I think it's really important to remember this is just one person's interpretation. The Bible, especially a book like Revelation, it's full of symbolism, allegory, and it's led to tons of different interpretations throughout history. I think what's really interesting about Larimer's take is that it shows us, even today, this fascination that we have with finding meaning in the cosmos.
Yeah.
Even with all our modern astronomy.
Yeah. And it's not just stargazing, right? He's putting an exact date on it, October 9th, 2024. It's like a celestial countdown. Makes you wonder, what would those ancient cultures, the ones who were so tuned into these movements of the stars, what would they make of all this?
It's a great question. And it leads us to something I find particularly fascinating. Think about how we've been talking about Saturn and its significance to the Jewish people, that connection to the Sabbath. But then we have Larimer's interpretation. And it's like, hold on, remember all that stuff about Saturn? Well, it might also be a harbinger of the apocalypse.
It's a pretty wild leap.
It is a bold claim. But, when we look back at how those ancient cultures viewed the cosmos, it's not completely surprising. Remember how we talked about that fear associated with Saturn? Well, that wasn't unique to just one culture. I mean, a lot of ancient societies, they looked up and saw this place of wonder, yes, but also this potential danger.
So you're saying this idea of these events up there impacting our lives down here, it's not new. And Larimer's just tapping into this long tradition of interpretation.
Exactly. Let's take his interpretation of the 4 horsemen. He looks at Centaurus, right, the centaur, and he sees the first horseman, the conqueror. Now, centaurs, in mythology, they're associated with wildness, this untamed force. And it's not hard to draw a line from that image to this conquering warrior.
Okay, I see where he's going. What about the other horsemen? How's he connecting those to constellations?
He gets pretty specific. He connects Libra, the scales, to that second horseman, the one with the sword, the one that's usually associated with war and judgment. And Libra symbolizes balance, right? Yeah. Justice. So Larimer, he sees those scales as representing this weighing of souls, this cosmic judgment.
So he's creating this kind of celestial storyboard using these ancient figures, these symbols, to illustrate this whole interpretation of Revelation.
That's a great way to put it. He's taking these constellations, these are figures that people have been looking at, naming for centuries, and he's weaving them into his narrative. Mm-hmm. And, whether or not you agree with his interpretation, you have to admit that the way he brings it all together, astronomy, mythology, this biblical prophecy. Yeah. It's complex. It makes you think.
Definitely does. But I have to ask, as someone who studies these beliefs, do you ever get caught up in these predictions? Do you look up at the stars and think, what if they're right?
I mean, how can you not feel a sense of wonder? Maybe even a little, healthy awe when you really let yourself think about how vast the universe is in our little place in it. And so, while I try to approach these predictions with, a healthy dose of skepticism, it's also important to remember our ancestors, they looked to the sky for answers, for guidance, for meaning.
That's a good point. It's easy to forget that for most of human history, The stars were our calendars, our clocks, even our storybooks, in a way. It's how we made sense of things.
Exactly. And in a way, don't we still kind of do that today? I mean, we may have more scientific knowledge, but the cosmos, it still fascinates us. It still inspires that sense of wonder. And who knows, right? Maybe there are still secrets hidden up there, just waiting to be discovered.
Okay, so we've gone from the Bible being kind of quiet on some of those astronomical details to having an exact date marked on the calendar based on celestial alignments. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And what I find so striking is how these really old beliefs, like the ones about Saturn, they still resonate. It's like even with all our technology, a part of us still looks up at the night sky with this mix of wonder, but also maybe a little bit of trepidation.
It's true. We're talking about Saturn, this planet that's millions and millions of miles away. But for centuries, people have looked at it as this powerful symbol connected to fate, religion, entire cultures. What is it about these celestial bodies that just grabs our imaginations like that?
Well, I think it might just be this really basic human desire to find meaning, to find connection to something bigger than ourselves. And honestly, what could be bigger, more mysterious, more awe-inspiring than the universe?
I mean, you're not wrong. And, when you put it like that, it makes me think about Larimer's interpretation in a different light. It's not just about predicting, the end of the world, right? It's about trying to understand our place in it all, trying to find those connections between our experiences down here and something cosmic, something timeless.
That is a really insightful way to look at it. It actually reminds me of something Ibn Ezra wrote about Saturn.
Oh, what's that?
He argued that, yes, Saturn might represent limitations, but it also represents structure.
Yeah.
Discipline even, like that wisdom you gain through time and experience.
Okay, so not just this ominous force to be afraid of, but recognizing, I don't know, maybe the natural order of things, the ebb and flow.
Exactly. And when I was reading Larimer's take on October 9th, I couldn't help but think about that duality. Yeah, there's that fear, that uncertainty for sure, woven right through it. But there's also this underlying sense of awe, wonder even. He's reminding us, I think, that we are part of something so much bigger, something ancient, powerful.
It's interesting you bring up Ibn Ezra. We've been talking about all these interpretations of the stars, but we haven't really touched on how those interpretations, well, they can change, even for the same celestial body.
Such a good point, because it really highlights how even our understanding of the cosmos, it keeps evolving, right? What one culture saw as a harbinger of doom, later it could be a source of inspiration. Or, hey, just scientific curiosity.
Exactly. And it's not just about new discoveries. It's about those old assumptions being challenged, finding new ways to make sense of the universe, our place in it.
100%. And in a way, that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It's not just the stars up there. It's the stories we tell about them, the meaning we give them, and then how those meanings end up shaping how we see ourselves.
Yeah.
The whole world around us even.
It's we're looking at this map of the sky, but it's also this map of, I don't know, human consciousness, our hopes, our fears, our beliefs, even our questions.
Ooh, I love that.
Huh.
A map of human consciousness. And just like the stars themselves, our understanding, it keeps shifting. New patterns, new connections. It's never really final.
It really does make you wonder what future generations are going to make of all this. Our interpretations.
Right.
Are they going to look back at Larimer's prediction and laugh? Or are they going to see it as a part of this long, long line of humans trying to find meaning in all that's out there?
I think that's the beauty of it. The stars. They're always there, shining down. But it's the stories we tell, the meaning we find, that's always evolving. It's never finished.
It's humbling and inspiring at the same time. You know what? This whole conversation makes me want to dust off my old telescope.
Me too. Never a bad time to see what's up there.
Well, listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the star-studded secrets of the Bible. We went from those ancient texts all the way to some pretty modern interpretations, exploring that connection, that really fascinating and often complex connection between the cosmos and human belief.
We saw how these celestial bodies, they've inspired wonder, but also fear. They've been linked to destiny, to cultural identity, even to the apocalypse.
But as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with a question to think about. Something to keep in mind the next time you look up at the night sky.
Knowing that for as long as we've been around, really, we've looked to those stars for guidance, for answers, for a sense of our place in it all. What will you search for when you gaze up at those celestial wonders? You said Saturn, it's about limitations, yeah, but it's also about structure, like discipline, even, you think about it, wisdom, that comes with time, with experience.
Right.
He was saying, don't just be afraid of it like it's this, this bad omen.
Right.
It's more about understanding,
Right.
working with it. And then you can actually, find a deeper way to live.
So not just fearing Saturn, but respecting it, appreciating it for what it represents.
Exactly. And that's what got me thinking about Larimer's prediction. Yeah, there's those elements of fear, the uncertainty, sure, but there's also this awe in there, a sense of wonder. He's putting it out there, we are part of something so much bigger.
Way bigger than ourselves. I get that.
And it takes us back to Ibn Ezra, because we've been talking about all these interpretations, right, across history, but what's so important to remember, those interpretations, they change.
Oh, for sure. What might have terrified people 1,000 years ago might not even, I don't know.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating, is how our understanding of the cosmos evolves. It's not static.
Right. It's we're not just making new discoveries, we're discovering new ways to think about the old ones too.
100%. And that's what this whole deep dive, it really brings to light.
Right.
It's not just about what's up there, the stars themselves.
Right.
It's the stories we tell. It's the meanings.
Yeah.
And how those end up shaping, our whole understanding of ourselves even.
It's like that map idea again. We're looking at the stars, but we're also kind of looking at a reflection of ourselves.
Yes. And just like with the stars themselves, our understanding of the universe, it keeps changing. New patterns emerge. You make new connections. It's never truly finished,
Makes you wonder, what will people think way down the line about what we believe now, about Larimer's prediction, will it seem crazy or just part of the journey?
That is the question, isn't it? It's that beautiful mystery. The stars, they're always there, constant. But it's the stories we tell, the meaning we find, that's always evolving. Never really over.
Well, listeners, it seems like a good place to, I don't know, maybe wrap our minds around that thought. We've come to the end of our deep dive into, the Bible and the stars.
We started with some ancient texts. We found our way to some pretty modern interpretations.
Yeah.
And explored this really incredible link between what's going on up there in the cosmos and what's going on down here, I guess you could say, in the human heart.
And as always, we like to leave you with something to think about. So next time you're looking up at the night sky, think about this.
For as long as there have been people, we've been looking to the stars. For guidance. For some kind of answer. For a sense of maybe where we fit in all of this. So the question is, what will you be searching for?